to another episode of I Do Stuff While I Talk About Stuff that I like and am interested in. Today's episode is I'm gonna, first of all, get rid of these atrocities and then repaint my nose with my signature red while talking about how cowboys aren't real. I'm not trying to do a transition. I'm trying to change the color. Last time, I don't know if anyone noticed this, but last time I changed the color like that, like I put my hand over the thing, my light went from this beautiful, like, holy freaking orange to like the ugliest Fight Club poster green. Like yellowy green. It was terrible. So I hope my screen right now is showing true to life. I look pretty. The coloring is pretty good. I just look like a face floating in darkness. I'm not a face floating in darkness. There is my room. It's the void. It's like I am in the house from Mark Z. Danielewski's House of Leaves, which I just finished reading, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the death of the cowboy. Not the death of the cowboy. We're talking about the non-existence of the cowboy. And yes, I clickbaited the title because obviously cowboys are real. Or real. Have been real. But okay, let's set the scene. When we talk about cowboys, our American traditional ideal of a cowboy comes from the 1860s to the 1880s. Like, kind of, it's, first of all, it's just a 20-year period. Cowboys didn't dominate the freaking West like we thought they did. Real cowboys, like cattle herders, that job only existed from like 1860 to like 1880, because you know what was happening in the 1880s? This guy Joseph Glidden invented barbed wire in the late 1880s, and then the West became like, that was like the end of the open range or whatever. And Joseph Glidden invented barbed wire in the late 1880s, and that was the end of the open range because people started fencing their farms in, which meant there's nothing, like, you can't really be free because all these people are fencing their things in, so you can't just roam like you could anymore. So that part of cowboy life was gone. And then what also happened was, with technological advances in the late 19th century, like refrigerated cars, refrigerated railroad cars, and like they started sprouting up like meat packing plants, so cowboys weren't needed as much. For reference, cowboys' jobs used to be to bring the cattle from the ranch to a railroad station, like herd all the cattle in, put the cattle in like a railway car, and then the cattle get shipped off to a meat processing plant. During the 1880s, people started fencing in their things, and then also in that time, meat packing plants began to be built closer to ranches, and then there were also refrigerated cars. So that meant farmers could like put their cattle into a meat packing plant, chop it up, and that meat could be refrigerated and it could be preserved as it goes to places. They don't just put the live cows on carts anymore. So cowboys were kind of rendered obsolete. So then, after the 1880s, cowboy life was mainly like, they were ranchers, which is like fine and cool, but I want to bring attention to the fact that when we Americans think of a cowboy, it is not a correct conception of a cowboy. Like, when we think of a cowboy, it's like all this open space, and they're lone rangers, and they're all alone, and they're just exploring the West, and they're free, and they're solitary, and they're lonely, and blah 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 blah. Cowboys didn't exist like that. And I don't know. I just want to call attention to the fact that the West is very mythologized. And when you look closer at the West, a lot of things that we think about the West aren't true. Even like Cowboys are real. Even like even our vision, like think of a cowboy right now. You're thinking of a Frederick Remington painting. Basically what you're thinking of is a Frederick Remington painting. And in reality, that was simply not true. And cowboy life was not crazy, awesome ranger life like we thought it would. A ton of cowboys, like maybe I think it's like pretty evenly. Don't trust me on anything I'm saying, but cowboys were a diverse range of people. There were Mexican cowboys because the cowboy tradition started with vaqueros in Texas, who were Mexican cowboys, and we kind of got that from them. So first of all, the idea of a cowboy isn't even all American, but there were a good amount of cowboys who were Spanish speaking or from Mexico, because when we acquired Texas, there were still Mexicans living there. So a good portion of cowboys were Mexicans, and then another good portion of cowboys were African American. Because think of this: what was the cowboy period? 1860 to 1880. What happened in 1860? What happened in the first half of the 1860s? The Civil War. So we have, right after the Civil War, during Reconstruction, we have all of these freedmen fleeing the South because, yeah, they're free. Who wants to deal with that? The idea for a lot of freedmen, the idea was that the West, actually not even just for freedmen, it was for everybody. It was that the West was so mythologized. Even back then, the West was like dreamland. It was the American dream. Hello. Can we get this green tint off of me? The dreaded green tint is back. But even back then, the West was mythologized. It was the American dream. People back then went to the West because it was like a new beginning for them. So a lot of African Americans after the Civil War, even before the Civil War, traveled west to have new beginnings, and it was kind of like forge your own future, and there was less discrimination to be feared out there because there weren't as many people out there, and it was just like it was a no man's land. All this to say, there are a lot of African American cowboys, there are a lot of Mexican cowboys, and there are perhaps a few Native American cowboys. I don't know. So first of all, our conception of a cowboy is wildly biased and mostly incorrect. Here are the things that are wrong about our conceptions about the popular conception of a cowboy. First of all, we think they're all white. Just off the top of your head, you're thinking of a white cowboy, generally. Second of all, they didn't exist for that long. And third of all, the role they played as, like, the freedoms they had, I feel like were not that crazy. Okay, so think of like in your mind a cowboy. What traits come to mind? Oh, they're solitary, they're free, maybe a little bit of chivalry. That's pretty good. I don't know where I was going with that. But our idea of a cowboy as like maybe my thesis is actually completely wrong. My point isn't so much that cowboys. Obviously, my point is not that cowboys aren't real. My point is the cowboys we believe in have never existed as such. And also, another thing I wanted to talk about is that the public has never known a true cowboy. There has never been a true cowboy in the public eye. Try to think of a cowboy. I'd say like, well, if we're trying to think of a historical cowboy, I'm sure most people would be like Billy the Kid, Annie Oakley, Wyatt Earp. Billy the Kid, outlaw, not a cowboy. Annie Oakley, a circus performer in a Wild West show, a performative cowgirl. Wyatt Earp, I'm pretty sure he was a sheriff, not a cowboy. So all of these famous cowboys, aren't actually cowboys. The public has never known a true cowboy. You want to know why? Because being a cowboy rests on anonymity. You can't be a cowboy and be in the public eye. Those are two things that don't coincide. We love cowboys. America loves a cowboy. But our love of cowboys is so hollow because you can't love a cowboy. You can't know a cowboy. The very nature of cowboys is such that they have to leave private lives, and they're poor. Cowboys were poor. They were working a thankless job in terrible conditions because they had no money. Again, these cowboys were mostly minorities or poor white people who had no money. So the very idea of a cowboy demands that you're solitary herding cattle, that you're poor, and that you are anonymous. These people were basically like wage slaves. So the public can't have ever known a true cowboy because if we knew a cowboy, they weren't a real cowboy because all cowboys are anonymous. So, yeah. How do you guys feel about that? And all this mimicry that we've been doing of cowboys is wildly inaccurate. And any famous person you think is a cowboy is not. Unless they're rodeo cowboys. But that's not the cowboy that America loves to mythologize. We love a classic 1870s cowboy. But cowboys, the true spirit of a cowboy is necessarily lost to time. Because You can't be a cowboy and be famous. They're opposing things. A cowboy cannot be known, or else he is not a cowboy. The nature of a cowboy is that you resist fame. You're not looking for fame, you're looking for money. And we love to mythologize these people that were actually pretty down on their luck. It's not like this is not an American dream. Cowboys had it pretty bad off. And if a cowboy represents America, if the quintessential, if the epitome of an American, of a red-blooded, red, white, and blue-blooded American is a cowboy, and our conception of a cowboy is fundamentally miscorrect. So let's redo that. If the quintessential American is a cowboy and our conception of a cowboy is fundamentally incorrect, then what does that say about America? Are you guys picking up what I'm putting down? So yeah, cowboys, not real. Anybody parading as a cowboy, not real. The public has never known a true cowboy. The cowboy that we think of is not real. The cowboy we think of has been artistically portrayed so many times that it's become a caricature of what a true cowboy was. Through artists like Frederick Remington, someone else, and someone else. All the true cowboys have been lost to history, and they shall remain lost to history forever. This was possibly like the worst video. This was probably like the worst time I've ever talked. This is like in the top 10 times I shouldn't have talked. And I have absolutely no idea why anybody would be watching this. And I'm sure nobody is going to watch this. And I'm sure I've made wildly incorrect historical claims. That's false. I think I made like a little bit incorrect historical claims. But let me tell you this. I just took AP U.S. history. I studied every day for that class. Even when I didn't have a test, I studied every single day. So I know my stuff, kind of. And yeah, that's my excuse for why there's gonna be no sources under this video. Is first of all, if you're looking for a historically accurate video on cowboys, go to read an essay. Go on JSTOR. Get your 100 free articles per month. That's what I've been doing. I've been reading a lot of articles on cowboys. And clearly they've done nothing because I'm incoherent and I don't know how to talk. And yeah. I seriously, if you're watching this, comment down below. Tell me how bad I was at talking. Seriously, I can't talk. This is basically why I have a YouTube channel, basically, is so I can just talk, and eventually I'll get good at talking, as evidenced by that sentence. But that day hasn't come yet. If you're watching this, comment how good I am at talking, on a scale of 1 to 10, 0 being can't talk, 10 being can talk super well. 25 people who watched my last video. Please rate my talking skills down below. Anyways, if you're looking for historical accuracy here, you're probably not here. You should be watching this if you have nothing to do with your life. Because I have nothing to do with my life either. I'm just making this random speech. And I'm not even like a historical expert. I'm just a girl on the internet. And isn't that how all the historical experts started out? This wasn't nearly so put together as my video on snails. Posting train wrecks, posting unedited train wrecks on the internet for the public to see. Unedited 20 minutes of me talking about Cowboys with absolutely no aim, no script, no sources, no plan. I just sat down. I just sat down and said I'm going to talk about Cowboys. And now I've been talking about how much I suck for 5 minutes. And that's me out.